So up till now we have studied the types of consciousness and the process of consciousness, and also the consciousness that are called process-free consciousness. Now, process-free consciousness are those that have the function of relinking bhavanga and death. Now, this flow of or stream of consciousness goes on and on and on until not the end of life, until the end of the samsara. So as a conclusion, the manual says here, for those who have thus taken rebirth, from the moment immediately following the cessation of the rebirth linking consciousness, that same type of consciousness, apprehending that same object, flows on uninterruptedly, like the stream of a river. So a stream of a river just flows on and on and on. In the same way, this flow of consciousness goes on and on and on. Now, at the beginning of one life, there is rebirth consciousness. So that rebirth consciousness lasts for 3 sub-moments. So when the rebirth consciousness disappears, immediately following the cessation of rebirth consciousness, that same type of consciousness, apprehending that same object, flows on uninterruptedly. So that means immediately after the rebirth consciousness, that consciousness arises again, but this time it has a different function. And this consciousness, and that is repeated, takes the object of the rebirth consciousness. So it does not take any new object, but just take the object that was taken by the rebirth consciousness. And it flows on uninterruptedly like a stream of river, and it does so until the arising of the death consciousness. So until one dies, this flow of citta will go on and on, so long as there is no occurrence of a cognitive process. So if there is no VTs, if there are no thought processes taking the prominent objects and so on, then this flow of bhavanga will go on and on and on. It will flow uninterruptedly like a stream of a river until the end of one life. And here the manual gives the meaning of the word bhavanga. Being an essential factor of existence or life, this consciousness is called the life continuum or bhavanga. Now bhavanga is made up of 2 parts, bhava and anga. The word anga you find in the word magganga, factors of magga, and bodhjanga, factors of body. So the same word anga is used here. Now bhava means an existence or life, and anga means a factor, a part, here an essential part. That means if the bhavanga does not arise, life would have ended. So bhavanga is a important factor of existence or of life. That is why it is called in Pali bhavanga. So it is difficult to translate into English, and so they translate it as life continuum. So continuity of life. At the end of life, at the end of one life, having become the death consciousness, this same Bhavanga consciousness becomes a dead consciousness in the form of passing away. On the occasion of passing away, in the book, I think it is better to translate it as in the form of passing away. It then ceases. So that is, ceases for one life. So one life is just arising of Patisandhi or rebirth consciousness, and then during life many moments of Bhavanga, and also many moments of other types of consciousness, and at the end of the life then the same type of consciousness that has a function of relinking and Bhavanga arises, functioning now as death. So in one life these three are identical and they take the same object. Thereafter the rebirth linking consciousness and the others continue to occur. Now if you look at the diagram of death rebirth linking consciousness, you see life 1 and life 2. So it can go on like life 2 from life 3, life 3 from life 4, and so on until the end of the samsara. So thereafter the rebirth linking consciousness and the others mean the Bhavanga consciousness and death consciousness, continue to occur, revolving in due sequence like the wheel of a cart. So there can be no end of the wheel of a cart when it is rolling. It's rolled on and on and on. So this continuity of consciousness also rolls on and on and on until one attains parinibbana, or one becomes an arahant or a Buddha or a Pachika Buddha and passes away. So until then this flow of consciousness will go on and on, doing different functions at different moments. And as a conclusion, the manual gives us some Pali verses. They are just the same as what has been said. So just as here, so again in the next existence, there arise rebirth linking consciousness, life continuum, cognitive processes, and death consciousness. So what is life? Life is just these types of consciousness going on and on and on, one after another in their due order. Again, with rebirth and life continuum, this stream of consciousness turns round. That means goes on and on. The wise, disciplining themselves long, understand the impermanence of life. Impermanence of life here means impermanence of this round of rebirth and death, because here the author is describing the round of rebirth. The rebirth and life continuum, this stream of consciousness turns round or goes on and on, means this is the round of rebirth and death. And those who have disciplined themselves for a long time understand the impermanence of this round of rebirth and death, because at every moment there is a new consciousness arising, and that new consciousness lasts for only one moment, and then next moment there is another new type of consciousness, and so on. So there is no permanency in this round of rebirth. At every time there is a new mind, a new matter arising and then disappearing. So they realize the deathless state. That means they become arahants, and completely cutting off the fetters of attachment. So when they become arahants, they completely cut off the fetters of attachment. Now attachment and other mental defilements are called fetters or ropes. They are the ones that bind us to the round of rebirth. So long as we cannot cut these fetters, we will be bound to this wheel of birth and death, and so we will never get out of this round of rebirth. So once the fetters of attachment and actually other fetters as well are completely cut, then that means the end of this round of rebirth and death. So completely cutting off the fetters of attachment, they will attain peace. So I want you to put the will before attain peace, because the Pali word there is Isanti, which is in a future tense. So will attain peace. And peace here means the final passing away. Now you may be aware that there are two kinds of Nibbana described in the books. One Nibbana is that which an enlightened person experiences during the time when he is alive. Suppose a person becomes a Sotapanna or say Arahant. So before he dies, he can experience Nibbana by getting into the Samapatti, by getting into the sustained attainment of fruition consciousness. So by entering into the fruition consciousness Samapatti, he is said to experience Nibbana. So the Nibbana experienced before the death of an Arahant is one kind of Nibbana. It is called Sa-upadisesa Nibbana. So at the end of the 6th chapter we will find that Nibbana with the aggregates remaining. That means Nibbana that is experienced while the aggregates are remaining. That means while the Arahant is still alive. And the other is the Nibbana that becomes evident when an Arahant or a Buddha dies. When an Arahant or a Buddha or a Pachaka Buddha dies, then his remaining aggregates, his remaining mind and matter cease. And there is no rebirth or no new mind and matter arising after that. So that kind of Nibbana is called Anupadisesa Nibbana Dhatu. The Nibbana element with no aggregates remaining. So here, by saying completely cutting off the fetters of attachment, the other meant the first kind of Nibbana. So when a person completely cuts off the fetters of attachment, he experiences that the first kind of Nibbana. And he will attain the second kind of Nibbana when he dies. So here peace means not just peace, but it is the element of Nibbana with no aggregates remaining. So that means a person disciplines himself for a long time or practices meditation and so on, and then understands the impermanence of life, understands the impermanent nature, suffering nature, non-soul nature of all conditioned phenomena, and then he realizes the deathless state. That means he becomes enlightened. And when he reaches the 4th stage of enlightenment, he completely cuts off the fetters of attachment. And then later on, at death, that he will attain peace, or he will realize the second kind of Nibbana element. And the first kind of Nibbana is called Nibbana of mental defilements, and the second Nibbana is called Nibbana of aggregates, because the first Nibbana is when the fetters of attachment or mental defilements are destroyed. So that is a destruction of mental defilements. That is one Nibbana. And when an Arahant, a Buddha and a Vajjhaka Buddha dies, then their aggregates just disappear. So no more aggregates are produced. So that second Nibbana is called extinction of aggregates. So after understanding the consciousness and how they arise and disappear through the thought processes, and also understanding the 31 planes of existence and how beings are reborn from one existence to another, and how this round of rebirth and death goes on. And then when a person practices Vipassana meditation, then he will penetrate into the nature of all conditioned phenomena, and he will reach enlightenment. And when he reaches the fourth stage of enlightenment, he is able to eradicate all mental defilements, and that is the first kind of Nibbana. And at his death, then he will realize the second kind of Nibbana, which is the extinction of all remaining aggregates. So by this conclusion, the author actually hinted to us that we should not just understand or study this book, but we must try to practice so that we can destroy this flow of or stream of consciousness which is going on and on. So this is the end of the 5th chapter. Now, at the beginning of the 5th chapter, we studied the 31 planes of existence, and we call it cosmology of Buddhism. Now there are many more things to know about the world, how the world comes into being, how the world is destroyed, and so on, and how the world is first inhabited by beings of human beings. So whether we believe it or not, whether we like it or not, it is good to know how our ancient teachers, basing on the teachings of the Buddha, understood about this world, the beginning of the world, and how the beings came into, reborn onto this world. I will refer you to a book if you are interested, and that is Visuddhimagga. It is called the Path of Purification. I think it is in the 13th chapter. In the Abhidhammattha chapter, that coming into being and then destruction of world is described in some detail. And in connection with the thought processes in our country, our teachers taught also the Rūpa process, the metta process, and it is called Rūpa Viti in our country. So we will also study just a little of that at the end of the 6th chapter. So now we begin the 6th chapter. So up to the 5th chapter we have studied the Citta, Cetasika, only 2. We have studied only two ultimate realities. So the first chapter deals with the different kinds of or divisions of Citta, and the second chapter explains to us the Cetasikas and then how they come into combination with different Cettas, and the third chapter teaches us the classification of Citta with regard to feelings, roots, functions, and so on. Now the fourth chapter teaches us the thought processes, and the fifth also process-free consciousness and planes of existence, and how beings are born, and so on. So now we come to the third ultimate reality, which is Rūpa, which is matter. So the first ultimate reality is, as you all know, Chitta, consciousness. And the second ultimate reality is Cetasika, mental factors. And now we come to the third ultimate reality, which is called Rūpa. Rūpa is defined as something that changes when met with adverse conditions or opposite conditions. So when it is hot, we have one continuity of material properties in our bodies, and then when it is cold, there is another continuity, and so on. So in that way, there is change in the continuity of material properties, and that is what we call Rūpa. Rūpa is defined as something that changes, that means that changes with cold, with heat, with hunger, with thirst, with bites of insects, and so on. And change here means the apparent change, change which is evident, easy to see. Because if we say something that changes is called Rūpa, then we should call mind Rūpa, because mind changes more quickly than matter. Matter lasts for 17 thought moments, mind lasts for only one moment. So mind changes more quickly than the matter. But here the change means the apparent change that we can perceive, that we can see. So it is the apparent change that is meant when we say Rūpa is something that changes with adverse conditions. And that Rūpa, sometimes it is explained as something that is deformed. It's the same thing. Change means sometimes deterioration, and sometimes just a different continuity of matters arising. So when it is cool, there is one continuity of matter, and when it is hot, another continuity, and so on. So you may explain it as something that is deformed, or something that changes, or something that is afflicted. You can say anything, but the real meaning here is that it changes. Something that changes with heat, cold, hunger, thirst, bites of mosquitoes, wind, sunburn, and creeping things. And in Abhidhamma, the Rūpa or matter is first divided into two broad divisions. The first division is called Mahabhuta, great essentials. And the second division is called Upada Rūpa or Upadaya Rūpa. I would translate it as depending matter. So the first one is called Mahabhuta, or the great essentials. They are the basic elements of matter. There are four of them: earth element, water element, fire element, and air element. And in Abhidhamma, earth element means not necessarily the earth, but the quality that resides in the earth, that we find in the earth. So when we pick up a piece of earth and handle it, then we feel the softness or hardness of that piece of earth. And so the hardness or softness is what we call earth element, not necessarily the earth. So you put your finger in the water and you feel some softness there. So that softness is earth element. So you find earth element in water also. And then there is water element, fire element, and air element. So we'll come to them later. Now the second division of matter is upada rūpa. It is translated as derived material phenomena in this book. The Pali word upada means depending, something dependent on. So it is not accurate to translate it as derived material. So derived means something coming from the other one, another one. Suppose there are great essentials and then dependent ones come from them or derive from them or something like that. But it is not like that. These dependent ones are those that depend on the four great essentials to arise. Not that they are derived from these four, but for their arising they need these four as their basis. So it is better to translate it as dependent matter than derived matter. So there are, the one division is the derived matter, and they are the ones that depend on the four great essentials to arise and to exist. So here the great essentials may be compared to the earth, the derivative phenomena to trees and shrubs that grow in dependence on the earth. So they arise and they exist independent on these four great essentials. I think they are like Chittas and Cetasikas. So Cetasikas are those that depend on Citta to arise. So when there is no Citta, there can be no Cetasikas. In the same way, when there are no four great essentials, then these dependent ones cannot arise. So whenever they arise in dependence on these four great essentials. And there are 24 of the dependent matter taught in Abhidhamma. So 4 great essentials plus 24 dependent ones make 28. So there are altogether 28 types of material properties. There is a table on page 236 of the book. So this is the overview of the 28 material properties. Now you see the great essentials. So there are 4 great essentials, and they are earth element, water element, fire element, and air element. And then there are sensitive phenomena. That means sensitive material properties. And they are eye sensitivity, ear, nose, tongue, and body sensitivity. And then the third group is objective phenomena, those that are objects. Now visible form or visible object, sound, smell, taste, and touch, or tangibility. Now there is no number for tangibility here, That is because touch is not a separate objective phenomena, but just the combination of three elements or combination of three great essentials: earth, fire and air. So combination of earth, fire and air are what we call tangibility or touch. So if we put a number here, we will get 29 and not 28. So it is not given a number here. But when we say objective phenomena, we say there are 5 objective phenomena: visible form, sound, smell, taste and touch. And then the fourth group is sexual phenomena: femininity and masculinity, the being a female, being a male. Some characteristics from which we understand that a certain being is a male or a female. And then the next one is heart phenomenon. Because there is only one heart, it is called heart phenomenon. So it is heart-based. You have met heart-based in the 3rd chapter. And then the sixth one, life phenomenon, is life faculty. Now this is material life faculty. Now you met mental life faculty in the 2nd chapter among the 52 Cetasikas. So among the 52 Cetasikas there is one called, again, life faculty, Jivitindriya. So there are 2 life faculties, one mental and the other physical, and now this is physical life faculty. That means something that is in our body that keeps our body alive. And then the next one is nutritional phenomenon. That means some nutrition that we find in the food. So we eat food and then we get the nutriment from that food. So that nutriment or nutritious element is what is called nutritional phenomenon. So it is not necessarily the food, but the nutriment that is contained in the food. Now these altogether 18 are called concretely produced matter. They have real existence. They are the real ones. Now there are 10 that are called non-concrete matter, because they do not really exist, but they are some mode or form of what really exists. And among them the first one is called limiting phenomenon or space element. So space is one of matter, although space is nothing, but we call it matter. And the next group is communicating phenomena, bodily intimation and vocal intimation. So by bodily gestures we let other people know our wishes, and by speech we let other people know our meaning. So these 2 are called intimation, bodily intimation and verbal intimation, and we communicate with bodily intimation or vocal intimation with each other. So they are named here communicating phenomena. And then mutable phenomena. They can be changed. Lightness, malleability and wieldiness. Now these names you find among the 52 Cetasikas also. And plus 2 intimations. So mutable phenomena consists of 5. These 3 mentioned here, 22, 23, 24, plus 20 and 21. So these 5 are called mutable phenomena. And then the last group is of 4 characteristics of matter. And they are production of matter, continuity of matter, decay of matter and impermanence of matter. So roughly now we see that there are 28 material properties. 18 are called concretely produced and 10 are called non-concrete matter. Now we will go through them one by one. Now the earth element, the first one. In Pali, the earth element is called Pathavi Dhatu. Now Pathavi means earth and Dhatu is translated as element. In Pali, Dhatu is something that bear its own intrinsic nature. So something that has its own characteristic, its own intrinsic nature is called Dhatu. So here the earth or the earth element is called Dhatu. And the earth is called Pathavi in Pali because it serves as a support or foundation for the coexisting material phenomena. So the other phenomena depend on the earth element. So earth element is something like a support or foundation, and so it is called Pathavi in Pali because Pathavi means the root of the word Pathavi means to expand or to spread out. And as I said before, the earth element is actually the hardness or softness that is contained in every material property. Now when we say hardness, we also mean softness because they are relative terms. And when we study the terms of Abhidhamma, our teachers taught us that there are 4 aspects of each of these phenomena, each of these mental and physical phenomena. So with regard to the Cetasikas also, this guide gave us the characteristics, function and so on of each of the 52 Cetasikas. You may go back and read them. So these 4 aspects are first characteristic. Now second is function. And the third is manifestation, and the fourth is proximate cause. So when we study any of the topic in Abhidhamma, we must understand these 4 aspects of each one of the Dhammas taught in Abhidhamma. That is, if we can. If it is too difficult, then we may just leave them. So now here the guide gives us all these 4 aspects. The earth element has the characteristic of hardness. So hardness is the characteristic of earth element. The function of acting as a foundation. So acting as a foundation, acting as a receptacle is its function. And manifestation as receiving. So it manifests to the mind of a yogi as receiving something. Now this is for meditators. So when they meditate, they may meditate on the earth element. So this earth element, when meditated upon, appears to their mind or manifests itself to their mind as receiving. So this is called mode of manifestation. And its proximate cause is the other 3 great essentials because they depend on each other. Both hardness and softness are modes in which the earth element is experienced by the sense of touch. So when we say earth element, we mean both hardness and softness inherent in everything. So that is why we can find earth element in the water, in the fire, in the air, and so on. Now the second element is in Pali Apo Dhatu. Apo means water, so the water element. Water element means fluidity or trickling, oozing. So water element is the material factor that makes different particles of matter cohere Because there is water element, things stick to each other. Things we use, things we see are all manifestation of this Abhidhammattha. Because if there is no Abhidhammattha, there can be no such thing as a cup or as a flower or whatever. Because every particle in it will be scattered like sands on the river bank. So there is a kind of cohesiveness in the material particles, and that cohesiveness is what we call Abhidhammattha or water element, not necessarily the water. So that is why we find Abhidhammattha in the earth also, in the water also, in the fire and in the air. Now it has a characteristic of trickling or oozing. That means, what do you call that? The water oozing from something. Its function is to intensify the coexisting material states. So it helps the material states arising together to intensify. And it is manifested as the holding together or cohesion of material phenomena. So when yogis contemplate on a water element, it manifests itself to their mind as something holding together some other things. And its proximate cause is the same as the other one, the other three great elements. So dependent material properties depend on the four great essentials, and one of these four great essentials depend on the other three. So the approximate cause is said to be the three other great essentials. Now, Abhidhamma holds that unlike the other three great essentials, the water element cannot be physically sensed, but must be known inferentially from the cohesion of observed matter. Simply that means we cannot touch water element. We can touch water, right? But what we touch is not water. It is the combination of three: fire element, earth element and air element, but not water element. So according to Abhidhamma, water element cannot be touched. What we think we touch is not the water element, but the other three elements. So even in water, we cannot touch the water element. And the third one is fire element, Tejo Dhatu, the element of fire. Its characteristic is heat, so temperature. When we say heat, we mean also cold. So heat or cold is relative terms. They are relative terms. And so when heat decreases, then we say it is cold, and when the cold decreases, it is hot. Its function is to mature or ripen other material phenomena. Just as fire can cook things, this is also a fire element. So it makes other material properties mature or ripen. And it is manifested as a continuous supply of softness. So when treated with fire, things become soft. So it is called continuous supply of softness. Both heat and cold are modes in which the fire element is experienced. When it is hot, it is Tejo Dhatu, and when it is cold also it is Tejo Dhatu. And the last one is the air element, Vayo Dhatu. It is a principle of motion and pressure. Its characteristic is distension. So characteristic of Vayo Dhatu is to distend things, to extend things. Now when you put the air into the balloon, and the balloon stays extended, so because there is air element in the balloon. So the characteristic of Vayo Dhatu is distension, and its function is to cause motion in the other material phenomena. When there is motion, we know that there is air element. Without air element, there can be no motion. and it is manifested as conveyance to other places. So when there is movement, it is like conveying or moving things from one place to another. So that is the manifestation of the Vayo Dhatu or air element, and its proximate cause is the other three great essentials. It is experienced as tangible pressure. So when you practice meditation and you concentrate on the rising and falling of the abdomen, you experience some tension in the abdomen, or the abdomen rises and falls, and so you actually are aware of the air element at that time. So these are the 4 elements that are a basis for the other 24 material properties to arise and to exist. The teaching of 4 elements can be found in other teachings or other philosophies as well, but in Abhidhamma the 4 elements are made to be very refined, because when we say earth element, we do not mean necessarily the earth, but we mean the quality that inheres in earth, and the same with the other elements, fire element and air element. And according to Abhidhamma, again, water element cannot be touched. So we experience water element in other ways, but not by touch. Whenever we touch something, that means we touch the 3 great elements, combination of 3, the earth element, fire element and air element. So these 4 form the basis for other material properties to arise and to exist. The next group consists of 5 sensitive material properties. And these are 5 types of matter located in each of the 5 sense organs. So the sensitive matter are located in the eyes, ears, nose, tongue and body. And these are very fine, small material properties that are sensitive to light and color, sensitive to sound waves and so on. Now the eye is called a composite eye. Composite eye means eyeball is made up of not the sensitive parts only, but there are other parts as well. So the eye, as we know it, is called a composite eye. And in this composite eye, there are material properties that registers light and color, and that serves as physical base and door for eye consciousness. So when eye consciousness arises, it depends on these sensitive material properties in the eye. Nowadays we may say that the eye sensitivity is the sensitive materials that are in the retina of the eye. So retina is where the image is reflected, and so from there, according to what modern science says, they send the message to the brain and so on. But according to Abhidhamma, when they strike at the retina, they strike at the sensitive parts in the retina, and those sensitive substances serve as a base for the eye consciousness or seeing consciousness to arise. And that sensitive part in the eye is also called a door, through which the objects are presented to the mind, or through which the different types of consciousness arise. So the Pali word for the sensitive material phenomena is pasada Rūpa. Pasada means clear Rūpa. Then the second one is ear sensitivity. So ear sensitivity means again the small particles of matter that are located in the inner ear. So it is described as to be found in the place shaped like a finger stall and surrounded by fine brown hairs. So that is what is described in the ancient commentaries. So we don't know whether they really cut open the ear and describe this so accurately. So in the place shaped like a finger stall means a ring, finger ring. So then there is the inner ear in the ear, and where the sound waves strike, and that serves as a basis for hearing consciousness to arise. Now nose sensitivity is in the nose, inside the nasal orifice, as the substance that registers smell. So there are some parts in the nose which sense the smell. Not all of the whole nose, but at the upper end of the nasal cavity there are some sensitive material properties that can sense the smell. And so when the smell comes into contact with those parts, then we experience or we know the smell, or smelling consciousness arises in our mind depending on those sensitive parts. And then the next one is tongue sensitivity. They are taste buds in the tongue. They're distributed in many places on the tongue, and they register taste. And the body sensitivity extends all over the organic body. So body sensitivity is like a liquid that soaks a layer of cotton and serves to register tactile sensations. Body sensitivity is to be found in all of our body except the tip of nails and also hair. Everywhere else we can find the body sensitivity. So wherever it is touched, we know the sense of touch. So the sensitive parts in the body, all of the body, serve as a basis or a door for the touch consciousness or body consciousness to arise. So these are called 5 sensitive material properties. The sensitive parts in the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and the body. And the sensitive part of the body resides in the whole of the body except the tips of the nails and hairs. And the others reside, or others are found in their respective places. So these are called the 5 sensitive material phenomena. They will correspond to 5 kinds of objective material phenomena, and we will do it tomorrow. So now the questions. Why was it apparently so easy to become enlightened during Buddha's time? I think during Buddha's time there were more 3-root people than 2-root people. Now those who meet Buddhas have already accumulated the paramis in their past lives. So they are like flowers that are ready to open up, just waiting for the rays of the sun to hit them. So when they met Buddha and Buddha taught them, they just became enlightened. But as you know from the thought process, every moment of enlightenment must be preceded by Vipassana moments. So without practice of Vipassana, nobody gets enlightenment. The duration of the practice of Vipassana is so brief, so short, that we think that there was instant enlightenment during the time of the Buddha. Bird shops bring in birds for Buddhists to practice animal liberation. When Buddhists practice animal liberation in this way, will they gain merit? Those who practice animal liberation, who let go the animals from being put in the cage, I think they will gain merit. But those who catch birds and put in the cages just to be released again, I think that is not kusala. Because they cause suffering to the birds. But those who let go the birds, who liberated the birds, they will gain merit. Now, can you explain Bhavanga, Javana and Tadaramana in detail, or the difference between the process-freed and cognitive process? Now you know what Bhavanga is. It is the constituent of Bhavam, one life, right? And it means the consciousness that is produced by karma and that arises in one life again and again and again as buffers between active moments or active thought processes. And Javana are those that experience the object fully. So, and they have force or power because they do not arise just once or twice, but they arise 7 times, so that they gain momentum. And it is during the Javana moments that we acquire what is called karma. So we acquire good karma or bad karma, kusala karma or akusala karma during the Javana moment, and not during the moments before the Javana or after the Javanas. So Javana moments are actually very important in the thought processes. And Tadaramana is those types of consciousness that arise after the Javanas and take the objects that are taken by Javana. That is why they are called Tadaramana. So when they arise after the Javanas, they are called Tadaramanas. But they may arise at other places also. So when they arise at other places in other circumstances, they are not Tadaramanas. They are Mahavipakas or they are Santirnas and so on. Now process-free Chaita and cognitive process, that means process-free means they do not belong to any thought process. These 19 types of consciousness that have the function of Patisandhi, Bhavanga and Chuti. They do not arise through any door because they themselves are doors. And they are not included in the thought processes. Although in the diagram they may be put between inverted commas to show the 17 thought movements, but actually they are out of the thought process. That is why they are called process-free. So process-free are also door-free consciousness. The cognitive process is active thought processes, when we see something, hear something and so on. How may one cultivate the causes and conditions so as to render unwholesome karma defunct? You may cultivate wholesome karma as much as you can, so that the unwholesome karma does not get chance to give results. If the unwholesome karma cannot give results in the specific period, then it becomes defunct. So you can make the unwholesome karma from giving results by creating unfavorable conditions for the unwholesome karma to give results. That means by creating the kusala environment, by acquiring kusala karma. So when you have more kusala karma, the akusala, unwholesome karma may not get chance to give results. Is it necessary to say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu aloud for it to be merit making, or could it be said silently in the mind? So what is important is for you to be happy about that, to rejoice, right? So you can say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu in your mind, or you may say aloud. So both ways you get the share. Now, is it possible for beings in Rūpa Vajra and Arūpa Vajra realm to die before the end of the full lifespan? It may be difficult for them to die before the full lifespan unless they are bodhisattvas, because they are reborn there as the result of a powerful consciousness, which is jhana consciousness. So the powerful jhana consciousness will give them, I think, full lifespan there. But bodhisattvas, it is said that bodhisattvas do not live their full lifespan when they are reborn as devas or brahmas, because it is only the human world where they can accumulate paramis. So when you are born as a deva, you cannot practice much of these 10 paramis. So in order to fulfill their paramis, it is said that bodhisattvas deliberately die from their lives as devas or brahmas and are reborn as human beings. It is called death by wish or something like that. How long before death do the signs of death appear, and how long do they last? It is difficult to say how long, but when a person is approaching death, maybe sometimes it is days, sometimes it may be just a few hours or even a few minutes. And how long do they last? They will last until the death, or even after death they can exist for some moments. But since these moments are very brief, we can say that they can last until the last moment in their life. It is said that just before the Buddha entered the Parinibbana, he entered into jhana in the following sequence: first to fourth Rūpa Vajra jhana, first to fourth Arūpa Vajra jhana, fourth to first Rūpa Vajra jhana, first to fourth Rūpa Vajra jhana, and then entered the Parinibbana at the fourth Rūpa Vajra jhana. Can the Buddha not enter Parinibbana of any other jhana stage, and why? Is this the same for all enlightened beings? It is not the same for all enlightened beings. It is for the Buddhas only. The fifth jhana or fourth jhana is an important jhana in the Rūpa Vajra jhanas. It is the basis of abhiññās, and also it is the basis of how can I say? Now, when Bodhisattva was contemplating or practicing Vipassana on the factors of dependent origination, that means on avijja, on saṅkhara and so on, it is said that sometimes he stopped practicing vipassana and gets into the fourth jhana. And after staying in the fourth jhana for some time, he emerged from the fourth jhana and then practiced vipassana on the factors of dependent origination. And then after some time, he entered again the fourth jhana and so on. And why? It is said that vipassana is very difficult. Vipassana, whatever you experience in vipassana is just undesirable things. You see the impermanence, you see the suffering, and so when you are in vipassana for some time, you become wearied. That means your understanding becomes blunt, because you have to deal with what is not pleasant. So in order to sharpen his intellect again, Buddha went into the fourth jhana attainment. Then after staying in the fourth jhana for some time, then his mind becomes sharp again, and then he went into vipassana again and so on. So fourth jhana is, I think, an important jhana for all arahants and Buddhas. Okay, now it is past 10 o'clock, so I'll take this for tomorrow.